Have you ever wondered what happens to a marriage when two people share the same bed but never share the same prayer? When they sit at the same table but never kneel at the same altar? When they build a life together but walk separate roads to heaven? Saint Teresa of Ávila saw it. She saw what most couples never see until it is too late. She saw the invisible wall that rises between husbands and wives who live together but pray apart. And what she witnessed in 1662 changed the way she spoke about marriage for the rest of her life. Throughout the 16th century, Spain was burning with religious reform. The Inquisition walked the streets, conversos hid their faith, families split over doctrine. And in the middle of this chaos, Teresa of Ávila, a Carmelite nun from the high plateau of Castile, was rebuilding the spiritual life of Europe one convent at a time. But Teresa was not just a reformer, she was a mystic. God showed her things that ordinary eyes could not see. She saw souls in purgatory, she saw demons at the altar, she saw the state of grace shining like light or absent like a pit. And one afternoon, in the convent chapel at Ávila, she saw something that would haunt her for decades. If you value documented mystical history like this, subscribe. It is the best way to support our work. Also comment from which city you are hearing this from. This script is researched and factual, using sources from the Libro de la Vida, Teresa's own autobiography, written under direct obedience to her Dominican confessors between 1562 and 1565, and the Cuentas de Conciencia, her spiritual testimonies preserved in the Carmelite archives at Ávila and Cross, referenced with the critical editions published by Efren de la Madre de Dios and Otger Stegink in 1967. These are not popular retellings, these are primary documents written in Teresa's own hand. Now back to the information. Teresa was praying before the Blessed Sacrament. It was late afternoon, the chapel was quiet. She had been kneeling for over an hour when suddenly her vision shifted. She writes in her spiritual account number 58 that she saw two souls standing before the throne of God. They were husband and wife. They had lived together for 30 years, they had raised children, they had worked side by side, they had grown old in the same house, but they had never prayed together, not once. The husband prayed in the morning before work, the wife prayed at night before bed. They respected each other's faith, they never mocked, they never argued about God, but they never joined their hearts in a single prayer. They lived parallel lives under the same roof, and that parallelism, Teresa saw, had created a gap, not a visible gap, not the kind of distance you could measure with words or gestures, but a spiritual gap, a space where unity should have been but was not. Teresa saw what that separation had done. She saw the invisible crack that ran down the center of their marriage. It was not hatred, it was not betrayal. It was something worse. It was distance, a cold, respectful, polite distance that neither of them even noticed until death pulled them apart. She described it later as seeing two trees planted side by side. Their roots never intertwined, their branches never touched. They grew tall, they grew strong, but they grew alone. And when the storm came, when death came, they fell separately. The husband died first. Teresa saw his soul rise toward heaven, but the wife could not follow, not because she was condemned, not because she lacked grace, but because the bond that should have pulled them together had never been forged. They had built a house. They had not built a single spirit. Teresa wrote about this vision with a sorrow that bled through every line. She said, "I understood then that marriage is not only the union of bodies or even the union of wills. It is the union of souls before God. And when two people refuse to kneel together, they are refusing the very grace that makes them one." She described the wife standing alone in the moments after her husband's death. The woman had been faithful. She had loved him. She had served him. But she had never shared with him the one thing that mattered most, her prayer life, her inner conversation with God, the secret movements of grace in her soul. And so when he died, she felt a loneliness that no human comfort could touch, because the deepest part of her had always been alone, even when he was alive. Teresa wrote this account in 1563. She was 48 years old. She had already founded the Reformed convent of San Jose in Ávila 2 years earlier. She had spent decades in prayer, much of it tormented by dryness and doubt. But by this point in her life, God was showing her visions almost daily. She saw heaven, she saw hell, she saw purgatory, she saw the inner states of souls, both living and dead. And what she saw in marriage shocked her. She had always believed that marriage was a sacrament. She had always taught that husband and wife become one flesh. But now she understood that one flesh was not enough. One spirit was the goal, and one spirit required one prayer. Teresa began speaking about this to the married women who came to her for counsel. Ávila was a small city. Fewer than 8,000 people lived inside its ancient walls. But Teresa's reputation had spread. Women came from across Castile to speak with her, wives, mothers, widows, and she told them all the same thing. Pray with your husband, not near him, with him. She explained it this way: when you pray alone, you bring yourself to God. When you pray with your spouse, you bring your marriage to God. The two acts are not the same. One sanctifies you, the other sanctifies the bond. And the bond, Teresa insisted, was the sacrament, not just the individuals. The bond. She told them to start small. One Our Father before bed, one Hail Mary in the morning, one shared moment of silence before a meal. It did not have to be long. It did not have to be formal, but it had to be together. She gave them specific instructions. She told them to kneel side by side, not facing each other. She told them to speak the prayers out loud, not silently. She told them to pray at the same time every day, so it became a rhythm, a habit, a law in the house. She warned them about the resistance they would feel. She said, "The enemy will make it feel awkward. He will make you feel self-conscious. He will whisper that you are being overly pious, that you are making your spouse uncomfortable, that prayer is better done alone. Do not listen. Push through the awkwardness. It will pass." She also warned them about the excuses. You will say you are too busy. You will say you are too tired. You will say the children need attention. You will say there is no time. But you are lying to yourself. You have time. You are choosing to spend it on other things. Because, Teresa said, the devil hates nothing more than a husband and wife who kneel side by side. He can divide them in 1,000 ways if they pray apart. But when they pray together, they become a fortress. Teresa recorded another vision in 1564. She saw a married couple kneeling together in their home. They were reciting the rosary. The room was dim. A single candle burned on the table. The husband was a merchant. The wife was pregnant with their 4th child. They were tired. They were poor. They had worked all day in the markets of Ávila, selling wool and linen to travelers. But they prayed. And Teresa saw what happened in the invisible world. She saw their guardian angels standing behind them, joining their prayers and lifting them toward heaven as a single offering. She saw grace descending on their home like rain. She saw the bond between them glowing with a light that no human eye could see. Then she saw something else. She saw the same couple 20 years later. The husband was dying. He was in bed, struggling to breathe. The wife sat beside him, holding his hand, and she began to pray the same prayers they had prayed together for 2 decades. The Our Father, the Hail Mary, the Glory Be. And as she prayed, Teresa saw his soul rise gently from his body, not alone, but accompanied. The prayers his wife was speaking were the same prayers they had always spoken together, and those prayers became a bridge, a pathway, a thread of light connecting his soul to heaven and her soul to his. Teresa wrote that she wept when she saw this. She understood then that shared prayer does not just unite a couple in life, it unites them in death, and even beyond death. She began teaching this vision to her nuns. She told them, "If you are called to the convent, you will pray with your sisters. But if you are called to marriage, you must pray with your husband. Do not think that because you pray alone you are holy. You might be holy, but your marriage will be weak." She said, "A marriage without shared prayer is like a house without a foundation. It might stand for years, but when the storm comes, it will fall." Teresa was not speaking from theory. She was speaking from what she had seen. And what she had seen was this. Couples who prayed together stayed together not just in body, but in soul. Couples who prayed apart drifted apart, even when they stayed in the same house. In 1567, Teresa founded her 2nd Reformed convent in Medina del Campo. The town sat on the trade route between Salamanca and Valladolid. Merchants passed through constantly. Families came and went. And Teresa met a woman there who would confirm everything she had been teaching. The woman's name was Catalina. She was 35 years old. She had been married for 12 years. She had 3 children, and she was miserable. Her husband was not cruel. He did not drink. He did not beat her. He provided for the family. He was, by all accounts, a decent man. But Catalina told Teresa, "I feel like I am living with a stranger." Teresa asked her, "Do you pray together?" Catalina looked confused. "We both pray," she said. "I pray in the morning. He prays at night." Teresa said, "That is not what I asked. Do you pray together?" Catalina was silent. Teresa told her to go home and invite her husband to pray 1 rosary with her that night, just 1, and to do it every night for a month. Catalina resisted. She said it felt awkward. She said her husband might refuse. She said they had never done it before and it seemed strange to start now, but Teresa insisted. She said, "You have tried everything else. Try this." Catalina went home. That night, after the children were asleep, she approached her husband. She was nervous. She asked him if they could pray the rosary together. He looked at her for a long moment, then he nodded. They knelt side by side in the main room of their small house. They began the prayers. It was awkward at first. Their rhythms did not match. One spoke too fast, the other too slow, but they kept going. When they finished, neither of them said anything. They went to bed in silence. The next night, Catalina asked again. Her husband agreed. The 3rd night, he was already waiting when she came into the room. After 2 weeks, something shifted. Catalina could not explain it, but the distance she had felt for years began to shrink. They started talking more, not about anything profound, just small things. But the coldness was gone. After a month, she returned to Teresa and told her what had happened. Teresa smiled and said, Now you know. Prayer is the furnace that melts two souls into one. Catalina asked, "Why did no one ever tell me this before?" Teresa said, "Because most people think marriage is about compatibility. But it is not. It is about communion. And communion requires prayer." Teresa included this story in one of her letters to her prioress at Salamanca in 1568. She wrote, "I have seen more marriages saved by 10 minutes of shared prayer than by 10 years of patience." She wrote, "When a husband and wife kneel together, they remember that they are not each other's savior. God is, and that reminder softens everything." Teresa saw another vision in 1570. She was in Toledo, founding a new convent. She had been praying in the chapel when she saw a young couple arguing. They were newly married, less than a year. They were fighting over money, over family, over 100 small things that did not matter. Teresa saw the demons circling them. She counted 7. They were whispering accusations, planting doubts, magnifying every irritation. The couple could not see them, but Teresa could. Then she saw something change. The wife stopped talking. She closed her eyes. She began to pray silently, just a few words. "Lord, help us." And the husband, without knowing why, stopped too. He was still angry, but something made him pause. In that moment of silence, Teresa saw the demons retreat. Not far, just a step back. And in the space they left, a thin beam of light descended from above and settled between the husband and wife. It was grace. Tiny, fragile, but real. The couple did not reconcile immediately, but they stopped shouting, they sat down, they talked, and by the end of the night, they were holding hands. Teresa wrote in her journal that night, "I saw today that even the smallest prayer, if spoken in the presence of your spouse, can break the hold of the enemy. Because when two people turn toward God, even for a second, they are no longer alone. And the devil cannot stand against a united front." If you value documented mystical history like this, subscribe. It is the best way to support our work. Also comment from which city you are hearing this from. Now back to the information. Teresa spent the last decade of her life traveling across Spain, founding convents, training nuns, and writing letters that would become spiritual classics. She wrote The Interior Castle. She wrote The Way of Perfection. She wrote hundreds of letters to lay people, priests, bishops, and nobles, and in almost every letter she wrote to a married person, she mentioned prayer, shared prayer, together, out loud. She told one woman in Seville, "You say your husband is difficult. I believe you. But have you ever prayed the Our Father with him? Have you ever asked him to join you in one decade of the Rosary? If not, you have not tried the one thing that can change him." She told another woman in Burgos, "You complain that your marriage feels empty, but you have filled it with everything except God. Fill it with God, and the emptiness will vanish." She told a man in Madrid whose wife had grown distant, "You cannot love her into closeness, only God can. So bring God into the space between you. Pray with her, not for her, with her." Teresa died on October 4th, 1582 in Alba de Tormes. She was 67 years old. She had founded 17 convents. She had written thousands of pages. She had been investigated by the Inquisition, defended by kings, and revered by the poor. But one of the teachings she cared about most was also one of the simplest. Pray with your spouse. In 1622, 40 years after her death, the Church canonized her as a saint. In 1970, Pope Paul VI declared her a Doctor of the Church, the first woman ever given that title. Her writings have been translated into dozens of languages. Her convents still stand across Spain, but the vision she saw in 1562, the vision of the husband and wife who lived together but prayed apart, is almost never mentioned. It appears in her spiritual testimonies, buried in the archives. Historians gloss over it. Scholars focus on her ecstasies, her levitations, her mystical marriage to Christ. But Teresa knew what she saw, and she knew what it meant. In her final letter to a married couple in Valladolid, written just 3 months before her death, she wrote, "You asked me for the secret to a happy marriage. I will tell you, it is not compatibility. It is not wealth. It is not even love as the world understands love. It is shared prayer. When a husband and wife kneel together before God, they become what God always intended them to be. One flesh, one spirit, one soul." She continued, "But when they pray apart, they remain two, and two can be divided, two can drift, two can forget why they came together in the first place." She ended the letter with this line, "If you want your marriage to last, do not depend on your feelings, depend on your prayers, and make sure you pray them together." The couple who received that letter kept it for the rest of their lives. It was found in their home after they both died, folded and worn from being read over and over. Their children said that every night, without fail, their parents knelt together and prayed the Rosary. Every night, for 43 years. When the husband died, the wife continued praying the Rosary alone, but she spoke the responses out loud as if he were still there. Her children heard her in the next room, saying his parts and hers, keeping the rhythm they had built together. And when she died 6 months later, her last words were not to her children. They were the final line of the Hail Mary. "Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death." Her Her children said she spoke it with a smile, as if someone was waiting. Teresa had seen it decades earlier. The bond forged by shared prayer does not break at death. It stretches, it bends, but it does not break. Because a marriage built on prayer is not built on human effort. It is built on God, and God does not let go. But there is another side to this story, a darker side, and Teresa saw that too. In 1573, Teresa was at the convent in Salamanca. She had been there for 3 weeks, settling a dispute between the nuns and the local bishop. The days were long, the nights were cold. The high stone walls of the convent trapped the winter wind. One night, she was praying alone in her cell. It was past midnight. The convent was silent, and suddenly she saw another vision. This time she saw a different couple. They had been married for 15 years. They had children. They had money. They attended Mass every Sunday. They fasted during Lent. They gave alms to the poor, but they never prayed together. The husband thought prayer was a private matter. He believed that a man's relationship with God was his own business. He prayed alone in his study before sunrise. He never invited his wife. He never even mentioned it. The wife felt the same way. She had her own prayer routine. She prayed the rosary while the children napped. She attended daily Mass when she could, but she never asked her husband to join her. She thought it would be intrusive. They respected each other's space. They respected each other's independence. They believed that a good marriage required boundaries. And Teresa saw what that boundary had done. She saw the wall between them. Not a wall of anger, not a wall of resentment, a wall of silence, a wall of assumption. A wall that said, you have your relationship with God, and I have mine. And that wall, Teresa wrote, was a lie from hell. She wrote in her journal that night, I saw how the enemy uses respect to destroy unity. He convinces couples that privacy in prayer is humility. But it is not humility, it is pride. Because when a husband refuses to pray with his wife, he is saying, I do not need you to reach God. And when a wife refuses to pray with her husband, she is saying the same. Teresa saw what happened to that couple. The husband grew more distant, not intentionally. He simply drifted into his own inner world. His prayers became deeper. His devotion grew. But it grew alone. The wife did the same. She developed a rich spiritual life. She had mystical experiences. She felt close to God. But she felt farther from her husband. They lived in the same house. They shared the same bed. They raised the same children. But their souls were on different roads. And then the crisis came. The husband fell ill. It was sudden. A fever that would not break. The doctors tried everything. Bloodletting, herbs, cold baths. Nothing worked. For 2 weeks, he burned. His wife sat beside him, wiping his forehead with cool cloths, praying silently for his recovery. But she did not pray out loud. She did not invite him to join her. Even in his sickness, she thought prayer was a private act. And he, in his delirium, called out to God alone. He begged for mercy. He confessed his sins. But he never reached for his wife's hand. He never asked her to pray with him. Teresa saw what happened when he died. She saw his soul rise from his body. She saw his wife collapse in grief. And she saw the tragedy that no one else could see. They had loved each other. They had been faithful. But they had never truly been one. Because they had never knelt together before the one who could make them one. Teresa wept when she wrote this account. She wrote, I saw the waste. I saw what could have been. If they had prayed together even once a week, even once a month, the bond between them would have been strong enough to carry them both through death. But they chose privacy, and privacy, in the end, left them both alone. She sent this account to her confessor, Father Geronimo Gratian, in a letter dated March 15, 1574. She wrote, Father, I am telling you this because I believe it is urgent. The enemy is deceiving married couples. He is convincing them that prayer is a personal matter, and they are losing their marriages because of it. Father Gratian took her warning seriously. He began preaching about shared prayer in his homilies. He told couples that they were not just called to love each other, they were called to sanctify each other, and sanctification required shared prayer. But most couples ignored him. They thought he was exaggerating. They thought their marriages were fine. They thought they were holy enough on their own. And they were wrong. Teresa recorded another case in 1575. This one was different. This one was a warning. She saw a couple who had been married for 20 years. They had built a successful business. They owned land. They had servants. They were respected in their community. But their marriage was dying. They fought constantly, over money, over the children, over who said what and when. They went to confession regularly. They attended Mass. They did all the external acts of faith. But they never prayed together. Teresa saw the demons surrounding them. She counted 12. They were feeding on the division. Every argument made them stronger. Every cold silence gave them more ground. And the couple had no idea. Teresa wrote, I saw that the husband blamed his wife. The wife blamed her husband. Neither of them blamed the real enemy. And so the real enemy kept winning. She wrote to the wife, a noblewoman named Donna Maria from Toledo. The letter still exists in the archives at Alba de Tormes. It is dated August 23rd, 1575. Teresa wrote, "Donna Maria, you have asked me how to save your marriage. I will tell you plainly. Stop trying to change your husband. Start praying with him. I do not care if he resists. I do not care if it feels awkward. Do it anyway. One Our Father, one Hail Mary, every single night, without exception. Do this for 3 months, and then write to me again." Donna Maria did not follow the advice. She thought it was too simple. She thought the problems in her marriage were too complex to be solved by a few prayers. 3 years later, her husband left her. He took a mistress. He moved to Seville. The marriage was annulled by the church on grounds of abandonment. Donna Maria wrote to Teresa again in 1578, asking for comfort. Teresa's response was blunt. She wrote, "You asked for my counsel, and I gave it. You ignored it. Now you are suffering the consequences. I'm sorry for your pain, but I am not surprised by it. A marriage without shared prayer is a marriage without a foundation. And when the foundation crumbles, the house falls." That letter shocked many of Teresa's admirers. They thought she was being too harsh, too cold. But Teresa knew what she had seen, and she refused to soften the truth. In 1577, Teresa was in Seville, her farthest convent from Ávila. The journey had taken weeks. The southern heat was brutal. She was 62 years old and her health was failing, but she continued to write, she continued to teach, and she continued to see visions. One afternoon, she saw a young couple in their first year of marriage. They were happy, in love, full of hope, but they were also making the same mistake every other couple made. They thought love was enough. Teresa saw their future. She saw the slow drift, the gradual cooling, the silent growing apart, and she saw the moment when it could have been stopped. It was so small, so simple. One night, 3 months into their marriage, the wife had a thought, a whisper in her heart, pray with him. But she ignored it. She thought it was strange. She thought they were already close enough. And that moment passed, and the opportunity was lost. Teresa wrote about this vision in a letter to her niece, Teresita, who was about to be married. The letter is dated November 7th, 1577. She wrote, "Dear Teresita, you are about to enter a great sacrament. You're excited, you should be. But let me tell you the one thing that will determine whether your marriage thrives or dies. It is not whether you love him. You love him now. The question is whether you will still love him in 20 years. And the answer depends on one thing. Will you pray with him?" And she continued, "Start now, on your wedding night. Before you sleep, kneel together and pray one Our Father. Do it the next night, and the next, and every night after. Do not skip. Do not make excuses. Do not wait until you feel like it. Make it a law in your house. And if you do, I promise you, your marriage will be strong. But if you do not, I promise you, it will be weak, no matter how much you love each other now." Teresita followed her aunt's advice. She married in December 1577, and every night, for 46 years, she and her husband knelt together and prayed. When Teresita's husband died in 1623, she wrote to the prioress at Ávila and said, "My aunt told me the secret, and it worked. I'm grieving, but I am not lost, because the bond we built through prayer is still here. I feel him with me even now, and I know we will meet again." That letter is preserved in the Carmelite archives. It is one of the few testimonies from a laywoman that confirms what Teresa had been teaching for decades: shared prayer works. It builds a bond that death cannot break. But the question remains, why do so few couples do it? Teresa asked this question many times. She asked it in her letters. She asked it in her prayers. She asked it in her conversations with priests and confessors, and the answer she received was always the same: pride. Not the loud, obvious pride of arrogance, but the quiet, subtle pride of self-sufficiency. The pride that says, "I can reach God on my own. I do not need my spouse for that." And Teresa wrote, that pride is the death of marriage, because marriage is not meant to be two people reaching God separately. It is meant to be two people reaching God together, and when one refuses to reach with the other, the whole purpose is lost. She wrote this in a treatise called Thoughts on the Love of God, composed in 1579 while she was recovering from illness at the convent in Ávila. The treatise was never published in her lifetime, but it circulated among her nuns and later among married lay people who sought her guidance. In it, she wrote, "If you are married, your holiness is not separate from your spouse's holiness. You are one flesh. If one sanctifies, the other is lifted. If one falls, the other is dragged down. This is why shared prayer is not optional. It is essential. Because in prayer, you're not just asking God to bless you individually, you're asking God to bless the union, and the union is the sacrament." Teresa saw one final vision in 1581, the year before her death. She was at Alba de Tormes, exhausted from travel. Her body was breaking down. She could barely walk. She spent most of her time in bed. But God was not finished showing her things. One evening, as she lay in her cell, she saw a vision of heaven. She saw the saints, she saw the angels, and she saw the married couples. They were together, not separate, together. She saw husbands and wives walking side by side in paradise, still united, still one. And she understood then that marriage does not end at death. It transforms. The bond forged on earth continues in heaven, but only if it was forged in prayer. She wrote in her final journal entry, dated September 28th, 1581, "I saw today that heaven is full of couples, not individuals who happened to be married, but couples who became one soul through prayer. And I understood that this is what God wanted all along. Not just individual holiness, but shared holiness, not just saints, but married saints, together." 6 days later, on October 4th, 1582, Teresa died. She was in Alba de Tormes. Her last words were recorded by the nun who sat with her. She said, "Lord, I am a daughter of the Church." And then, just before she took her last breath, she whispered something else. The nun leaned in close to hear. Teresa said, "They will be together. I saw it. They will be together." No one knew what she meant. The nun thought she was delirious, but years later, when Teresa's writings were collected and studied, the meaning became clear. She was talking about the couples, the husbands and wives who had prayed together, who had built their marriages on shared prayer. She had seen them in heaven, together, and she wanted the world to know. In the Carmelite archives at Ávila, there is a handwritten note in Teresa's own script dated 1576. It is not part of any book. It is not addressed to anyone. It is just a single line written in the margin of one of her journals. It says, "I saw today what I have always known. The couples who pray together do not just stay together, they become together. And that becoming is the whole point of marriage." Below that line, she drew a small cross, and beside the cross, she wrote one word, "Amen."